I want to take a few minutes today to talk to you about so-called American democracy and how it's an illusion, a fairy tale, a fantasy. For the longest time, it was only white male landowners that had a right to vote or any political say, and as a matter of fact, even a modicum of civil rights and human rights. And for the longest time, we practiced slavery in this country as much as we like to pretend that we didn't. When the 13th Amendment finally came around and freed the slaves, slavery merely evolved into sharecropping. When the 15th Amendment came around and, at least in theory, enshrined the right to vote for African Americans who were recently freed, Jim Crow raged for the next century and suppressed that right, subjugated that right, did everything they can to keep African Americans from the ballot box by force, if necessary. It was only when the 19th Amendment came around that women were granted the right to vote on a national scale. Even though bit by bit we have been progressing in the right direction, let's not deny that the foundation of this country is not the representative democracy, the republic that we pretend. And the founders did not trust the will of the people. Why do you think they instituted the Electoral College to begin with? It was never about people power. It was about state power. Now fast forward to today. The frontrunner for the Republican nomination for president is the former president who has 91 criminal charges against him, who is on bail in 4 different jurisdictions, who attempted a coup on his way out the door, even though he wasn't trying to leave, who attempted a coup in broad daylight on national television for the entire country and the entire world to see. He should be barred from the ballot box. He has forfeited his right to run for president, and yet here he is. Democrats, they talk about how they got to save democracy in this country. At the same time, is Joe Biden willing to debate his primary opponents? No. To be fair, I can't think of any instance where an incumbent president would have debated his primary opponents. But just because that is a trend, it doesn't make it right. At the very least, he should acknowledge his primary opponents. At the very least, the media should acknowledge his primary opponents. We're talking about Marianne Williamson and Dean Phillips and, of course, RFK Jr. before, he withdrew. And I decided to run an independent campaign directly in the general election instead. Listen, they canceled the Florida primary. Blatantly. They push up deadlines without telling anyone, and they tighten the thresholds without communicating anything. Phone calls were made behind the scenes, and the Democratic National Committee is colluding with the White House to keep these candidates off of ballots and to convince that, the American people, to convince the Democratic electorate that they have no other choice than Biden. And if you've been paying attention at all in the last few election cycles, then this should give you a feeling of deja vu. Because in 2016, Hillary Clinton's campaign and the Democratic National Committee blatantly rigged that process against Bernie Sanders, not only with superdelegates, not only with, giving Clinton debate questions in advance, but all sorts of other measures. Legal, illegal, ethical, unethical, whatever. In 2020, several candidates dropped out right after South Carolina, or right before Super Tuesday, came out and endorsed Joe Biden and put him over the finish line to squash the momentum that Sanders had that clearly was on track for the nomination. If you've paid attention at all, then this is only par for the course for Democratic politics. this country was never a representative democracy, at least in the way that we pretend. And what we are facing now is the logical consequence of the system that the founders set up to begin with. On top of that, we have seen this also get progressively worse and worse over the decades with each election cycle. But the Democrats and the Republicans, they collude with one another to keep third parties like the Green Party, Libertarian Party, and my party, especially the Socialist Party, off of ballots, off of the debate stage, out of the media, and out of public discourse entirely. We have a first past the post system where basically all you need is a tiny plurality, and then you take it all. There are alternative ideas out there in terms of preserving not only the right to vote, but also incorporating the will of the people and building not only plurality support, but majority support. Ideas like ranked choice voting or proportional representation or multi-member districts. These are things that we can do. But of course, the powers that be would never take these ideas seriously because all they care about is their pocketbooks. All they care about is the wealth and the protection thereof of the bourgeoisie. What we are seeing now are the dying breaths of an alien world to which we never belonged. Now is the time to build a new world entirely. How do we do this? Under the confines of this system that we are currently in. How do we break free? While reform can accomplish some good, I have lost my faith in it as a long-term strategy. Long-term, we must be seriously looking at revolution of some kind. And we can debate what that looks like, but we mustn't waste time. We mustn't drag out the process. And since we are here having this conversation about democracy, let's talk about workplace democracy, because the ballot box is not all that matters. Intimately, at the grassroots, on the ground, in your day-to-day reality. Corporations, they oftentimes act like mini dictatorships, or at the very least, oligarchies. The will of shareholders, the will of executives and CEOs, they trump the will of the working man and woman. Moreover, as I have described in other videos, and I encourage you all to look this up, research this, and make your own informed conclusion. But we, every single day that we go to work, we create surplus value, which we then in turn have stolen from us. That is how, business owners and, corporate executives, that is how they make all their profit without, contributing any actual labor themselves. They are exploiting our labor. That is the whole point of why I'm such, a vehement anti-capitalist. That is the whole reason why I'm such an ardent socialist, because socialism at its core. Now, there are different ways that it can, manifest itself. There are different versions of it, and, there are some disagreements within socialist or communist circles, but at its core, it's about people power. It's about people, I forget, the ballot box for a second, okay? Because oftentimes it's just for show anyway. But in reality, in your day-to-day life, it's about empowering the working man and woman. It's about empowering the masses so that not only they have a say in their futures, but that they can actually reap the fruits of their labor, not a percentage of, the fruits of their labor, but all of it. Not a slice of the pie, but the whole pie. That is why not only American democracy is a joke, but that is why the whole concept of democracy, period, across the globe is a joke. Now, there are places where it's not as bad. You have countries where they have multi-party systems. So at least in that sense, there are more options on the table. There are places that have ranked choice voting. There are places with multi-member districts or proportional representation. It manifests itself in different ways and in different degrees. But listen, let's not mince words. The concept of democracy, at least in the way that we are taught today, in the way that the media talks about it, in the way that scholars talk about it, in the way that politicians and statesmen talk about it, it's all a joke. It's all a joke. So, what does that mean for, the upcoming presidential election here in the United States? Look, if you want to, vote for the lesser evil, all right. Cool. But that is how we got the greater evil to begin with. It is the Obamas of the world, the Bidens of the world, the Clintons of the world, the Bushes of the world, how we even got Trump to begin with. Because this system does not work for any of us. And it hasn't worked for us in a very long time, if it ever has, really, to be honest with you. And I don't think it ever has. Well, depending on your demographics and depending on your wealth, of course. Because for some of us, it has worked. But for others, most of us, not so much. Why do you think we have seen an uptick in far-right authoritarian politics? Look at Geert Wilders in the Netherlands. Look at Javier Milei in Argentina. And look at Giorgia Meloni in Italy. And look at the Alternative for Germany rising up in the Bundestag in Germany. This has been a dangerous worldwide trend, and we have to get to its root. In 2024, I will proudly be supporting my party's nominees, William Stodden for president and Stephanie Cholinsky for vice president. Are they going to win? Of course not. But I'm going to stand with principle. I'm going to stand with principle.